What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. This is the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. And do note, I was the Innovation Award winner last year, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And we always say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We have another new friend on the Dr. Vibe show. Cheryl Judice holds a Ph.D. in sociology from Northwestern University. And before we went on live, she asked me, how do you think how to pronounce my last name? And I got it right on the first and the second try. Don't count on anything else, but at least I got it right twice in a row. Cheryl is a faculty member in the School of Education and Social Policy. She has taught sociology, social psychology, and African American studies at Lake Forest College, Northeastern Illinois University, and Northwestern University. For those who are into broadcasting, Northwestern is one of the places to go, by the way. Her research focuses on the intersections of race, class, and gender. Her book, Interracial Marriages, Black Women and White Men, published in 2008, was the first academic text published on the experiences of Black women in interracial marriages. Her new book, Interracial Relationships Between Black Women and White Men, focuses on the experiences of Black women who are dating, married to, or divorced from white men. Additionally, she has interviewed white men on why they prefer to date or marry Black women. So you know this is going to be another epic conversation, but let's say welcome to Cheryl for the first time and hopefully not the last time. How are you this evening?
I'm doing just fine, and thank you for having me on your show.
Well, you know what? It's our show because we work together and win together, and I have to thank you for responding to my request, so I appreciate that.
I'm always happy to respond when I can.
Wonderful. So before we get into a little bit of a fun conversation, let's find out a little bit about yourself. Can you share with our audience, our community, a little bit about your background? We know professionally what you're all about. Where did you grow up? What was life growing up, etc.?
Well, I grew up right in Chicago, which is just south of where I currently live. I live in Evanston, Illinois. And in terms of my background, I was one of 5 children. My family has always been pretty multi-ethnic for generations. It was not a new thing for me. Again, I grew up, went to Catholic schools and Catholic high school, and then I went to Lake Forest College. And my standing joke is that I never went to school off of Sheridan Road, because my girls' high school, plus where I went to college, plus Northwestern University, are all right off of Sheridan Road. So that was the one little joke I used to have. Nice. I'm married. I have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. I also have 2 granddaughters. And when I'm not running around, thank you. I so enjoy this time in my life. I'm married, and my husband and I are in the restaurant business, barbecue foods. In fact, he's fairly well known in Evanston. He's used oftentimes as a direction because we've owned the restaurant almost 36 years. And his name is Hecky. Really his name, Hecky's Barbecue. So if you ever get to Evanston, all you have to do is ask where Hecky's is. People go down to Hecky's. It's very centrally located.
I like the invite. I'm going to take you up on it if I'm near Chicago.
Okay, sounds good. Well, he's been ranked, for many years in barbecue foods.
Well, I almost feel like ending the conversation and getting up 5 and 8 hours and have some barbecue. I love my barbecue.
There you go. Yeah.
Growing up, did your parents stress education? Because you have achieved, and I'm saying this as a compliment, great educational value. You earned a lot. Where did that drive come from? Did it come from your parents? Did it come from one of your parents? Where did the pursuit of education come from?
It's just been a part of our family history for a very long time. I'm not a first generation college student. My mother went to Northwestern University. My father only went as far as getting a associate's degree. But education's always been the mantra. And of course, for many families, we always view education as the way forward. So the idea from the time I was a kid, I mean, I always knew I was going to college. It was never if you're going to college, it's where are you going to go to college? They stressed education, the fact that I grew up in a very much extended family. We grew up in a 6-flat apartment building in Chicago. My parents lived on the first floor. My grandparents, maternal grandparents, lived on the second floor. My aunt was on the third floor. My grandparents owned the building.
Wow.
And I can remember as a child, my grandmother started teaching me my alphabet probably at 3 years old. And by the time I went to kindergarten, you know, and I think about this because so often we talk about kids being ready for school. By the time I went to kindergarten, I could already read sight words. I knew all my numbers. I could write my name. Another little piece of trivia I've always loved to read. In fact, when I was in 8th grade, I won the award for having read 67 books over the course of the academic year.
How many?
Book 67. I beat it. I mean, because, you know, again, I was in Catholic schools. Those nuns required you to do book reports. And it was just something that was a part of my life growing up. I always have read quite, you know, a lot, the whole bit. So, yeah, lifelong education, lifelong educator. And again, that's about pretty well describes me.
Absolutely. Now, why did you focus, or how did it come about focusing in the area of race, class, and gender? How did that come into your journey of focusing in those areas?
Well, when I was in college, I was actually a psychology major. And a very important person in my life was this professor who did this study on what she called the psychology of racism. Why people need to be prejudiced, you know, why racism thrives. And that was such a fascinating class to me that I began to study race more closely because again, I'm just a little bit behind some of the civil rights movement, you know, and so race was a big and important thing going on, of course, across the country. So with all what was going on across the country, as well as my interest in, you know, what was happening to people based on race, I got very involved in the study of this. But when I decided to go to grad school, I recognized I didn't want to study people individually. I'm more interested in studying them from the group kind of experience, which is why I focused on sociology, because we study people in groups. And so I started off, I looked at race, class, and gender. I looked at, you know, outcomes, societal outcomes based on who you were, your social class, how you lived, and all of that kind of thing. So that's where my initial interest came from. As I said a minute ago, I come from a kind of multi-ethnic family. All across my family, there have been people married outside of the race for generations on both sides. And mind you, in this country, it wasn't even legal in some states to 1967. Well, I can trace the earliest interracial marriage in my family to 1930. And so,
Wow.
Yeah, but, you know, and of course, some of that is because my maternal grandparents were from Minnesota. And it was one of those states where this was not something that was regulated anyway. It was in Minnesota, if you're not familiar, they tend to have a very large Scandinavian population.
Yes.
And to the degree of what it says about the Scandinavians, they really didn't put much emphasis on it. Now, maybe had they been from other states, it would have been far more difficult. But yeah, I've had my research goes all the way back to 1930. So based on what happened in my own family, I started examining what's going on today in terms of interracial marriages and relationships.
Okay. I want you to just share a little bit about your first book, The Interracial Marriages Between Black Women and White Men. Give us a little background. How did that book come into being?
You know, with the conversation, I was in graduate school at Northwestern at the time with one of my professors, and we got on the topic of interracial relationships. And he kept talking about all the Black men with white wives and white girlfriends. And I was having a little bit of a disconnect because even though it at that time was probably 3 to 4 times more common for a Black man to have a white girlfriend or a white wife, in my personal experience, I know more Black women with white husbands. So when I told him that, I said, you know, this is really kind of an interesting conversation, because if someone mentions an interracial relationship to me, the first thing I'm thinking about are my Black friends with white boyfriends or white husbands. Well, you'd have thought I had said something, monumental. He said, really? I said, yes. And I said, and by the way, their experiences are probably a lot different from Black men with white wives. Just given the social hierarchy in this country, the social history of this country, a Black woman with white husbands tend to have an easier time of it socially than the reverse, even though the reverse pattern is far more common. So based on that, he said, well, how so? So I said, well, I'm going to do a comparison study between the two. So I interviewed 50 couples. And again, 30 were Black women with white husbands, 20 were Black men with white wives. And I compared their lives across several different dimensions. And I had so much fun with it, quite honestly, because I do like meeting and interviewing people. But do you know what happened was after I had done that, and that turned out to be my Ph.D. dissertation, a publisher contacted me and she said, and asked if I would turn it into a book. So I didn't even have to go and find a publisher. The publisher found me. And of course, I was very excited. But what happened was after they took my book, and mind you, I'm not paying anything to have it done, they sold it as a text, and it's quite expensive. And I was very disappointed because the people that I would want to have that information wouldn't be able to get to because it's a $99 text. And I said, so it's in all these university libraries, and a few people have bought it, but it still was not making the kind of inroads that I would like. For me, education is to help people broadly, not just, to have something that's not accessible to all.
So, and I was going to ask this about the most recent book, but I will ask it when we get there. But for this first book, was it hard to get people to interview?
No. In the area that I live in, Evanston is probably one of the most integrative communities. There are plenty of interracially married people here. It's a university kind of town where you get lots of diversity. In this area, around Chicago, you have interracial couples, but there are 3 sections where primarily interracial couples reside and feel very comfortable. One would be the Hyde Park section of Chicago, which would be out by the University of Chicago, think where Barack Obama lived and all of that. Excuse me. Then there's a suburb west of Chicago called Oak Park. Again, you have lots of interracial couples that live out that way. And here in Evanston, we have lots of them. So to find couples, it just grew by a snowball. I knew 2 or 3 couples, started with them. They always knew somebody else. So before you knew it, I had a long list. In fact, in doing the first book, it was just me arbitrarily deciding, okay, 50 people is enough. 50 couples are enough. But again, I could have found many more.
And okay, so when you decided to write the first book, who was the first person that you told and what was their reaction?
Well, the first person to know would have been my dissertation committee.
Right.
And they were very curious because, again, the stereotype is that it's primarily Black men with white wives. And so they were pretty interested to see what I was going to come up with. I find it interesting when I talk to people about it initially because it's still a subject that makes some people uncomfortable. But then again, why did I write anything that makes you comfortable?
I think these days, even more than even in the past, I think more so now.
I would agree.
Absolutely. So how long did it take you to complete that paper/book?
My first book took me about 2 years to pull together because I spent a whole good year. And by the way, I was teaching part-time then too, thinking that I can, as you would call, multitask or multi-purpose. Yeah. So at any rate, it took me 2 years with all the interviews, the transcriptions, then then putting it all together. Yes.
And what was people's reaction?
Well, basically the people that remember now, most people that know about it are a part of an academic community. So they were very positive because essentially I was bringing out brand new information. There was nothing prior to my text written about the experiences of Black women who are married interracially. But on the other hand, there was plenty of really old stuff written about Black men with white women. And quite honestly, for the most part, it was very negative. It viewed those it came out of this 60s type movement where, they were making these relationships in some way pathological. as like there's something, the black man is trying to act out of fantasy, the white woman was trying to act out of fantasy. And I just thought that was a pile of junk. Now, maybe there were some layers of that going on. You remember, this is, I'm after the civil rights movement, but I certainly wouldn't, I don't think I would ever use that to define the couples that I interviewed. Of all the couples that I interviewed when I was doing my book, most of the black men with white wives, I could very easily see them together. There are lots of common bonds. They were perfectly normal people. So I was really happy that I could dispel some of that old trash out there.
Okay. So you did the first one, and now you've come out with another one.
Right.
But actually, no, before we get to that, was there any pushback about the first book?
No, I can't say, because again, as I said, the publisher found it and they got it, and they got it all out there in the public domain. The biggest pushback was the cost, because nobody's going to spend $99 on a textbook. I mean, I wouldn't have spent $99 on my own book. So consequently, but I have been gratified that many university libraries did buy the book. Very but nice. I don't think more than 500 copies of that book were sold. And again, probably 90% of them were to the university libraries. Now, because of my second book being out there, people have begun to try and find my first book, and that's great. But and now in the years since I've written that, they've put together a version of it, I believe, like an ebook, but that's still too expensive. $45 is really just too expensive. I'm sorry, I just don't. That's not my idea of accessibility. So. Right. That was, I'm just turning all this off. So there you go.
No problem. Well, so just before we go further, I just want to shout out some people on Periscope. We have Sean Osby. Thank you for joining in, Sean. Also, Serena Wills. Thank you so much. And also on the Get Vocal platform, I have E.T. And Luke has been there almost since the beginning of our epic conversation. So second book, the book that's out now.
Right.
What was it easier to do than your first one?
No, it actually was not easier to it was easier to do from the point of view, it took a long enough period of time. What happened was I was getting so aggravated that people didn't have access to my first one, even though I talked about it a lot in classes and so on, that I said, that's it. I'm going to do a whole brand new study. But nice. Based on the research from the first one, I'm only going to focus on the experiences of Black women with white men, because that's by far the least common pattern and the area that people know the least about. So I started that study in 2014. At the time, I was working as an administrator in the graduate school at Northwestern, as well as teaching. And all I did was send out an email to my Black women graduate students explaining the purpose of my research and asking if they met any of the demographics of what I was trying to do. And if you did, let me know. Well, as it turned out, I think I sent that email to about 135 women, and I got back about 35 responses. And among the group were women that were dating white men, who had dated white men, who knew someone that was either married or dating them. And the list, once again, grew from there. So from 2014 to all through the end of 2017, 2018. But I did take some stops. I've got other work going on. I couldn't just interview nonstop. I just began collecting interviews and talking to groups. I would think in the, 19 years or more I've been kind of studying this topic, I've probably interviewed somewhere between 250 people at least. But I could start doing all these interviews and talking to people, and it was a lot of fun. And then guess what happened? My husband kept saying, you better get this book out. Somebody's going to steal your thunder, because guess what happened? Meghan Markle decided that she was going to marry Prince Harry. So I thought all the signs were aligning. Meghan Markle went to Northwestern University where I teach. Oddly enough, Prince Harry was born the day my husband and I got married. And I said, okay, all these signs are saying get this book done. So I said, okay, enough. I have enough material. And so I started really seriously writing my book at about December of 2017. And then I got done with it by May. And then I said, okay, let's divide this in a way that's easily accessible. So I divided it, first of all, into sections. It begins with an introduction as to why this topic's important. Then
Yeah. So was it, you were saying it was not as easy to do the second time around than the first time around?
No, they were probably equally as easy. I just had, I was just dragging things out in terms of, because I was working and doing other things as well. But whereas when I was doing my first one, it was more concentrated because I need to get done with my doctorate. But I don't know if I left off of this book. So I have 11 interviews with Black women that are dating white men, 14 with Black women that are married to white men, 10 with Black women that are divorced from white men, and 5 interviews with white men by themselves on why they preferred to date or marry Black women. And then when I interviewed the couples, I purposely put in there 7 couples where I interviewed them together, and 7 by themselves, where the women were by themselves, because I wanted to make sure they would say the same thing with or without, spouses. Well, they did. So I didn't have to worry too much about that. And again, recognizing that marriage was taking place, the royal marriage, and there was going to be a heightened interest in interracial relationships, I said, okay, I'm going to get this book out. And it came out, in June in ebook form on Amazon. And then, of course, I got the paperback version out right behind it.
So what were did you have any common themes that came out doing these interviews? Were there some common themes, or was every relationship different, or every interview different?
Well, almost every interview was different, but one of the common themes most often came through in the interviews with white men by themselves. One of the things that's interesting is that these men prefer some of the qualities in Black women that Black men don't prefer. So which I thought was for example, the white men I interviewed liked Black women because of their thought that Black women were very independent, that they weren't dependent. They knew what they wanted in life. They liked this take charge nature of the women. They liked having a partnership versus a situation with a woman where they felt they had to always be in charge. Of course, sometimes it's stereotype. Black men don't like Black women just being too strong or whatever that is. But those were qualities that white men admired in the Black women they were with.
Did they ever did they give any thoughts about why they thought Black women and Black men, how did they get into that situation? Like, how I'm trying to put it a certain way. What were their thoughts about Black love? Like, did they see, I don't know if you were, I'm trying to put this a certain way. Okay, let me approach it this way. Did they see color as a barrier, or did they just accept the lady?
In most cases, the men accepted color. There was one case where the man said he knew that his family, would be upset. But generally speaking, the men, many of them actually preferred women that were brown or darker, brown skin or darker than they just liked women of color, period. Many of them would have dated not just Black women, but like other women of color, Hispanic women, for example. So that was just that kind of preference.
And did they ever say how did they acquire this preference?
No. I didn't have anyone say anything. One of the stereotypes has been that oftentimes so many whites are raised by Black nannies, that there's this idea that there is a comfort with Black women that may not have been there in other circumstances. And I have heard that. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, what was the age range?
All over. In fact, even in my book, I was careful I interviewed far more people than I put in my book, but I wanted to be careful. I, got hold to the different age ranges so people could see themselves. So at the earliest, the age range was probably about 20 to 70, 72.
Wow.
Yeah. That I include yeah.
And with the age range, were there any did the opinions vary because of age? So this is something I'd like to have you share with us.
Well, first of all, it's far easier today to be an interracial couple than it would be like 25 years ago. For sure, younger interracial couples, meaning Black women with white men, and even the reverse pattern, have it far easier. Society is more used to that. Couples that I interviewed primarily for my first book had a whole different take. and they had some more racist type experiences that they had to go through in life versus what the younger couples would deal with. And also, interestingly enough, it's how the younger couples handled it. They didn't really, it kind of rolled off of them in a way that 25 years ago might not have been as easy to do.
It's interesting, just the age range of from 20 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did any of them feel any pressure being in those type of relationships, like pressure from Black or white communities?
Yes. And that it was even a little common. There was even some frequency of that among younger couples. Like some younger Black women heard from maybe their parents, their fathers, like, okay, now make sure you're not this guy's experiment, that he really genuinely likes you. They had some Black girlfriends like, you're crossing over now, what's up? That kind of thing. So they did get in some cases, they did get pushback from family members or from their friends.
There's the dogs.
Oh gosh, they're so big. I'll throw them out.
No problem. Yeah. Before we go further, I just want to shout out on the Get Vocal platform, Tony, Ryan, Cliff. Thank you so much for jumping on. And on Periscope, I know Bobby is on there. So Bobby, hope you and your son are good. And again, if anyone have any questions, please feel free to ask them. You can either type them in or jump into the conversation. How do you feel the climate has changed when it comes to interracial marriage now with your second book out compared to when you put your first book out?
It still continues, generally speaking, to be easier. There's far less resistance to it, but let's not create a Pollyanna story. There's still great big pockets in the United States where interracial marriages are not common and where you would pick up some resistance. You may recall that it was just 2-3 days ago, we got somebody down in one of these southern states saying, wait a minute now, I can't even hire this Black man for this job because they're not able to handle this. And I'm thinking, are we in the 21st century? But that's the kind of thing that you have to deal with it. I have had couples tell me that they have felt pressure on their relationship just because of the Trump administration, that he has so made people, he has polarized so many people that if, for example, I know a couple that live in a largely white suburban area, and she said things that she wouldn't think of saying or wouldn't have thought twice about saying. Now she's careful about saying, particularly in interracial settings. But she felt that was a new development. But again, that Trump had vomited up so much hatred, racial hatred, that did in some way jeopardize relationships that they had with whites or Blacks within their communities. Now, fortunately, nobody said it's jeopardized my personal relationship, but certainly they were well aware of what was going on in the neighborhoods around them.
And with the Black women in these situations, how intense did the pressure come with marrying or being with someone of a different race? How did some give any examples on how challenging it was or still is being in that situation?
Yes, they did. Now, can I ask you to put me on hold for just one moment?
Take your time. You go do your
right
thing.
Right back. I'm going to get
no problem.
All right.
We'll be here for you.
Okay.
So, folks, Cheryl's just going to put out her dogs because they are barking. Dogs rule in that house. But again, I'd like to thank everyone that's on the conversation. If you have any questions, please, if you're on the Get Vocal platform, you can type them in or come into one of the rooms. If you're on YouTube, I don't know if I shouted her out, but Serena Wills, if you want to. Oh, D.
All right.
Okay, D, thank you so much. I will ask Cheryl, okay. We actually have some questions here from the audience.
Okay.
DS on YouTube says, do you like the new look of television media, specifically television commercials showing interracial couples together?
Yes, but I have to put a caveat out that I watch so little television that I've only caught a couple of the commercials. And interestingly enough, it's primarily Black women with a white man.
Yes, it is.
You don't see the other way around, which I find fascinating because I said there are at least 3 times as many Black men married to white women than the reverse. But But you see what it is? It's always easier. And let's look at the dynamic behind that. White men are at the top of the social hierarchy. So essentially, all my research has confirmed is that a white man can be with virtually anyone and will not experience the same kind of societal disapproval or questioning that a black man with a white wife would experience, despite the fact that the numbers are different.
Okay, next up. Ryan is saying, I get it all the time. So, Ryan, if you want to jump in, Ryan, I think it'd be great to get your perspective. Now, Tony, you have a question here. What about non-traditional couples in general on the rise, not just international ones? I mean, tall people with short people, younger people with older people, now even same-sex relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't studied any of those, but I will tell you that I have had students on college campuses ask me if I had any interest in studying interracial relationships, black-white interracial relationships in the LGBTQ community. And so it may be, I might do that because, again, it would be nice to do kind of a comparison to see, how that plays out. Chicago is about to get a new mayor here on Monday.
Yes.
And she's African-American and her wife is white. So I can start right with Lori Lightfoot and work my way up.
Interesting. Do you feel in your studies younger blacks have a different view of this than older blacks?
Absolutely. And it ties into the fact that they have an easier time of it as well. I've had young black women, but I have to say some of that is gendered because still one of the real missions behind my book is to try and move the mindset among younger black women that they can be attracted to and attracted by someone outside of the race. There's still that resistance there big time.
Okay, so let me just stop the brakes on there. Are you a proponent of that?
Yes. I'm not a proponent necessarily that black women have to go outside the race and marry and try and find a white man, but just given the numbers, which is why I wrote the book, just given the numbers, the differences in the numbers of black men to black women. If a black woman limits her search to romantic love to a black man, she very likely will remain single. Here are a couple of statistics. I know you probably haven't seen my book yet, where I do go through some explanation with this. By the time in the black communities, by the time blacks are at age 16, black women begin to outnumber black women. Okay, so right at age 16. The same thing does not happen among whites until age 32. For black women in the 25 to 29-year-old age category, there are 3 black women for every 2 black men. Now that's not factoring any other reasons in there, just a pure numbers thing. So that's why I've been out there on the bandwagon saying, girls, if you hope to be able to find a husband, get married, have children, great if you want to marry within the race and that happens for you. But if you limit yourself, you very well, you're taking the risk that you're going to be single, because there's nothing wrong with black men other than the fact that there are just not enough of them.
Okay, interesting. Just want, and Ryan is saying, my friend C has a black dad, white mom, and he prefers black men. Ryan is saying, this is interesting. Ryan, if it's interesting, come on into the room. I'd love to because Ryan is based in Canada, western part of Canada, where he's black gentleman, African Canadian, predominantly white. And it's quite interesting getting the comments in here. And asking, we shall receive. Come on in, Ryan.
How's it going?
Hi, Ryan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I actually can.
Awesome. So, but yeah, no, a great conversation. But yeah, I get meme mugged all the time because I live in Hickville, Calgary, Alberta. It's getting better, but better compared to what, to the rest of the world. We will travel, like my girlfriend and I would travel outside of Calgary in some of the rural areas, and then you would get people like staring.
I'm sure.
And I've had that all my life. I mean, there's two issues that I have. It's like, first I get the stares and the me mugs from white men and from white women, and from black men and women as well. And then on the other hand, there's a social debate about blackness and pro-blackness.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I've been an activist since I was 22, around that time. Secret activist, but I've always contributed to my community in some way or fashion, or sat on panels, etc. And now that I'm with a white woman, I'm no longer pro-black, because you can't be pro-black and marry.
Who says no? I know.
Right, coming from a guy that's from Trinidad, where we're mixed with everything.
Sure.
So it's troubling for me,
well, it's
anyway.
important though that you don't let other people define you. You know who you are, and you can get all seduced by black only, or all that way. But the bottom line is that you're a human being, and every single one of us deserves to find the happiness personal happiness in our lives that we want. I just want to make sure that both black women understand that that's okay too, because a whole lot of this resentment comes because they think black men only want white women, which is crazy. So it's not a black male problem; it's a black woman problem, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Cheryl, okay, go ahead. No, go ahead, Ryan.
One more question. I'll step down.
No. Stay in. More. No worries.
One more question is that the one issue that I've always dealt with is when the topic of Black history, because I do like to watch documentaries. I do like to engage in my own history, and I like to teach my history to my son. That creates a hostile environment in the home, because my girlfriend doesn't necessarily, not that she doesn't agree, she's just doesn't know.
Okay.
So when she hears certain things, it's guilt, and why does it always got to be about white people, and why does it always got to be about this and that? And I'm just reciting history,
right?
So that's another issue that so I have to quietly say things without having to offend anybody, to my son, because he ought to know. I didn't grow up knowing, right? So I want him to know some of the things so that he feels more empowered,
right?
And more knowledgeable about and be able to recognize when things happen, because she doesn't see the people staring, or when we're even at the restaurant and the person comes and talks to her directly.
Yes,
ignores me and talks to her directly. So these are some of the issues that you kind of face. But I have that choice, or just be single.
Well, Ryan, it's interesting because those kind of microaggressions you have brought up are experienced by so many interracial couples. And the other thing I want you to always remember is to be authentic and true to who you are. You shouldn't be in a situation where a wife, girlfriend resents you educating your son. All you're doing is telling them the truth, telling them history. That's where there's no shame in history. This is what happened. White people have been in charge. It's not, and why she's feeling guilty about that. I always tell people, I have students that, I've had many students that are just constantly feeling guilt-ridden. I said, did you do any of this? Because the fact that you may have had ancestors that acted this way or so on, we're living in the 21st century. As long as that kind of stuff is not going on today, and you're equals within the relationship, people have to get comfortable. You can't alter history, but you can alter your present. And that's why I'm saying the idea that, don't tell him about, no, your son needs to be prepared for the kind of situations that he may encounter. And she should be comfortable with that. But again, when I was doing my study, some of the Black women who used to get, a couple of them were amused that their husbands, their white husbands, were more sensitive to racial nuances than they were. And as they pointed out, this is new for them. We've been dealing with this all of our lives. So, we get where you're coming from, but, lighten up. This is today. And, so that's the way I hope that your relationship will unfold, that everybody is comfortable being who they are, and you're equally sharing in your son's development so he knows who he is.
Totally.
Ryan, I want you to stay on it. It's interesting. Okay, in the fact that when with Cheryl, what do you say to people who's responding saying, "Hey, what about protecting the race?"
That's what a whole lot of Black women fall into this trap. I think Ralph Banks was probably the first one that I heard talk about preserving the race. With so many disparities that go on within the Black community, there are many Black women that grow up with this feeling like they have to preserve the race and they have to be the ones that are the vanguard for the. We know what's going to happen to Black men. And all that sounds very good, but I have to tell you, a part of that comes from low self-esteem. Because even though they may want to protect and preserve the race, that's a way that they don't have to engage with the fact that, well, if I don't get everything that I wanted out of life, then, that's simply because I have to uphold the race in some kind of way. And at the heart of it is low self-esteem, because what better person can uphold the race than someone that is self-confident, knows who they are, and recognizes the truth. Think about that. But again, let's not blame Black women for that. In Western society, every standard of beauty and femininity preferences white women. And Black women aren't going to ever look like white women, except those that, are multicolored contacts and wigs and weaves and all of that. But a Black woman who is comfortable and knows who she is won't feel limited in terms of her femininity and who she seeks love and happiness from. And that is really one of the missions of my book, to say, get over this, because I don't want you to be like maybe the first woman that emailed me that had read my book. You know what she emailed me? She said, I wish you'd written this book 30 years ago. She said, because now I am 53 years old. I kept waiting for my Black Prince Charming to come along. He never has. He said, I'm not going to have the family that I wanted. I know that there are certain things that are not available to me now. And I just wish that I had thought the way you're trying to get women to start thinking now. And, it's gratifying, but it's sad at the same time, because I know that she's just one of thousands. And that's one of the reasons I got on this topic, is because I know so many women along the life cycle, women that are far older than me, that have gone on and passed on, and women still far younger than me. They have never experienced a fulfilling romantic relationship, primarily because they limited their search to something that didn't exist for them.
Wow, good stuff. Ryan, anything you're wanting to add to what Cheryl just she's on it, eh?
I'm a student. I'm listening.
Well, I hope you'll read my book. Just read it. I'm trying to educate. I've tried to make this book as accessible to people as possible. So I think I have had nothing but, I shouldn't say nothing. I've had a couple of Black men troll me for, oh my gosh, they don't read the book and they're assuming I'm putting them down, which I'm not. But again, I hope that people read it and get something out of it that helps you move forward positively.
And I just want to shout out, there's a pile of people watching this live on Periscope, and thank you so much. And if you have any questions, can you type them in, because this is great. So many people on Periscope, so many people on Get Vocal, people on YouTube. Please, let's keep the conversation going. Cheryl, in your interviews, especially with the black or the Black women, did they bring out the point that they feel that the way Black men who are involved with Black women are treated differently than Black women involved with white men? I'm sure that must have came up.
Can you say that again? I got a little confused.
Okay, so in these interviews, especially let me rephrase this, with the white men that you interviewed, did they bring up the subject on how Black men who are with white women are treated compared to how Black women are treated who are with white men?
Yes. Even the white men that were with Black wives, and this actually goes back to my first study, almost everybody, but no matter which pattern they were engaged with, acknowledged that a Black man with a white wife is going to have a little harder experience socially than the other way around.
Wow.
The men
Ryan, what do you think about that, Ryan?
Say that last part there. I was just writing a comment that I was going to put in there.
Well, basically, in all the people I interviewed, particularly from my first study, no matter which way, which partner was black, which partner was white, almost all of them said that they recognized that black men in relationships with white women, had a harder time socially of it than the reverse pattern. So even the white men knew that they thought that as well.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I don't have any comments. I think she's dead on though. Dead on.
Did also the white men that you had conversations with, did they acknowledge and accept that they, for lack of a better term, have some privilege?
Yes. And the other thing that was interesting is that a couple of the white men in their interviews, they said, we were talking about children, they were very comfortable with the fact that if they had children, that their children would be identified as African American. And they were okay with it. And yes, they would want them to know both sides of their history, but recognizing how society is structured, they had no trouble with their children being identified as African American.
Wow.
And that gets a lot of people too, I must say, but that was what I found out, that nope, no problems. They love the mothers. So, I mean, that made it easy. Okay.
Exactly. And Ryan, you should have asked your question, but I'll repeat it out here. Ryan is asking, what about the high standards placed on black men by black women? Some men feel that black men are disregarded.
Well, now that part, I have to say, Ryan, I haven't studied that. That kind of falls outside of the purview of what I examine. So I'm sorry, I really don't want to comment on that because I haven't studied it. Mm-hmm.
No problem. And so, and especially with the white men, for a number of them, was this the first time, especially the ones that were married, had this been prevalent in their family history at all? Were they sort of like barrier breakers, for lack of a better term?
Yes. In one case, there was one case, and not only did they break the barriers, they opened up their families to other interracial relationships. In one couple where the husband's white and the wife is black, he was one of 9 boys, and he married his wife, and his brother then started dating a black woman, and he married her. So, I mean, that kind of, the family both kind of spread out from that way. For most of the white men, though, their black girlfriends or wives were not the first women of color they dated. They may have been the first African Americans, but some of them would have dated Hispanic women, maybe an African woman, Caribbean woman, that kind of thing. But for most of them, there wasn't the first one. But interestingly enough, as well, in the white men that I interviewed, one white guy, it's like he comes from one of these all-white suburban areas of Chicago. And he was just fascinated because he didn't grow up knowing that many black people. The only other people of color he met before college were Asians. And when he met, it just so happens that with the job that he took, his boss was a black woman. So guess what? That's who his wife is now. And he wasn't planning on that at all.
Yeah. Well, and Tony makes a comment here. He says, I don't see why it's a thing that's related to color. Excuse me. No one seems to have a problem with an American marrying a Canadian. Well, that's just nationality, Tony. Right. You could replace any nationality with any other nationality in that sentence. Mm-hmm. I hear where you're coming from, Tony, but unfortunately, race is a very prevalent thing in North American culture, and it has been for hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. Nationality is one thing, race is another thing.
True.
And there also seems to be, in different cultures, because Calgary is like a cluster of many different subcultures and cultures. And, for example, in the East Indian families, they have a pedigree that they want to protect. They all, Asian cultures as well. Yes, you'll have interracial dating, some odd, and it will always be with a white man. You rarely see other people mixing, and it's only a fling thing. It's only if you're seeing people mix, it's because they're just having fun and casually dating and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I like to answer to Tony's comment. I see it all the time. There's just this pedigree, because when it comes down to people actually getting married, it's always, people, all the cultures come back together. And I feel like black men and women are the ones that don't end up with anyone, or mostly black women don't end up with anyone because of that at the end.
You made my point. That's the very first sentence in my book. Black women are the only group of women in the country that can't take for granted that if they wish to get married to a black man, that there's going to be somebody there for them. The numbers just aren't there. And the only group of men that a black woman is less likely to be married to than a white man is an Asian man. Those marriages are even far less common. And what's interesting about that is that, again, within different Asian cultures, the women marry out at such high rates, whereas the Asian men do not. And that's pretty much the way it is. Another point to your point, Ryan, as well as to you, Dr. Vibe, is that color, don't ever pretend that it doesn't exist. And it is in far more than just African-American cultures. Among Asian cultures, many of those cultures, as well as even Hispanic, Latinx cultures, skin color matters. In fact, in Asian cultures, the closer you approximate white skin, the prettier you're viewed. Within Hispanic cultures, the darker you are, there's a connotation that somehow you are not as high class, as you're of a lower class. So even though African Americans are affected by that, we're by far not the only group where skin color matters. But on the same token, I have a brother who traveled internationally, and he's always in Europe. And he said to me, in Europe, nobody would think this is a hot topic. He said, because over there, he has seen many in Germany and other parts of Europe. He has seen many interracial couples going both ways. Black women with white males, because that's what's there, and black males with, white women. And he said he doesn't feel that they feel the same maybe level of discomfort that they may in this country.
Let me ask, Cheryl, what do you feel like this is increasing, the number of interracial marriages, relations with black women, white men? Why do you feel the numbers are going up? Like, did any of your participants give their thoughts on why this is becoming an increased number?
Well, I think number one, some people have already begun to notice what I'm talking about in my book, that if they've only put their eggs in a black male basket, there's not going to be anyone around. The other thing happening in this country is that the Hispanic population has begun to what I call flatten out the color barriers, because so it makes it a little easier to see, not as jarring as may once have been, because truly America is becoming very integrated, whether certain factors politically like it or not. I mean, that's just the way it is, particularly in large cities. There's all kinds of racial mixtures. But again, for black women, where you see the growth in them marrying white men, one of the differences is that these women are primarily meeting these men at work, at school, professional schools. I don't mean necessarily college. And typically interracial couples of either group, black males with white wives or black females with white husbands, they tend to be a little older than first-time couples getting married. So they've kind of worked through a whole lot of problems that younger couples may not have even thought about. But the marriages between black women and white men that I have analyzed, there are high levels of compatibility to begin with. For example, so many of them that interview were very much in the same profession, comparably educated, similar social class backgrounds, the whole bit. So I think that has begun to account for it, as well as more of a relaxation in strict black-white attitudes due to the fact that America has become more diverse. Multi-ethnic diverse.
Ryan, anything?
I have a comment, but not pertaining to what she just said. I'm just listening.
Okay.
I love it.
Make the comment.
Well, the one thing I wanted to talk about was when I was dating, and I believe that there is hidden biases. I've dealt with women that have hidden biases about black men,
Mm-hmm.
And pertaining to me, because I'm not 6'1", I'm not a basketball player, I'm not a football player. My voice is very high. And I have a kid and I had all these stigmas, but I'm very smart. I could carry on a conversation. I'm from Canada. I embrace the culture more than anyone. I was the only Black kid in my class. Now, the only women that I've ever been matched with on these dating websites were lower brow women that didn't smile in the pictures. You know, they had a certain look to them. They were sometimes I love all kinds of women, but it was very interesting to me that a lot of the women were either already divorced, they were older than me, way older than me, and they were overweight, and they were attracted to me, but no one else was. You know, Black women didn't want to date me because in this city, the Black women like to date white men. So because we're more of like in Calgary here, just to describe the economics, you know, we are a white collar city.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the women who are educated want to go, you know, where the power is, as opposed to dating out within their culture. So do you talk about that kind of stuff? Because I love women. I love all kinds of women, but it just started to become a pattern of the women that were actually attracted to me. And I kind of felt a kind of ways about it. I don't, you know, even ashamed to even think that way, because that's not my heart, but it's just the pattern that I notice.
Were those Black women?
No.
Uh-huh.
They're white women.
Well, there's a stereotype for you right there. And the stereotype is that Black men are more accepting of women that are quote unquote larger than size 0 than other groups of men would be. So that may be one reason why they reached out to you. I have a neighbor, and her daughter is not enormous by any stroke, but she always had trouble. And my neighbor just was straightforward. She said she liked Black men much better because they were not, you know, they were perfectly happy with her curves, whereas white men, she didn't attract so many. And mind you, this was not a woman that would have even been considered overweight. She was just not a size 0. But again, there are some connotations that there was a woman, you may know Anderson Cooper, who's on CNN. Well, his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, was famous for saying, a woman can never be too thin or too rich. And that seems to be the mantra for so many white women. They just cling to this idea of being really thin. So an overweight white woman probably has heard the stereotype that Black men like a little more, you know, fat on the bones than most white men may. So yeah, I can see that happening.
And I can see that too. I mean, you go to Jamaica, and then there's a drove of women going just to hang out in Jamaica to have a, you know, good time. But it kind of gets to you because the women that because I didn't have that biased in my head until I started dating, because a lot of the women had a lower self-esteem about themselves and whatnot. Didn't want to change certain, not even habits in terms of food or anything like that. I don't really care about that. It was just, there was just a low morale, and they could not see me for who I was as an individual, as a smart individual. They just saw me as the Black guy. And in Canada here, then they put on the patois. What you talking about, man? What you talking about, man? And it drives me nuts, you know? Because I want more than that. And then when I see the same women with white men, it is almost like I actually conducted an experiment on Tinder because I was just so interested in this dynamic. I put myself with the same credentials as a white guy, liked the same women, and they had a lot of things to say with this guy. What are you up to? What are you doing? Oh, I love this. I went to school here. But with me, it's like, meh, how are you doing? I'm okay. You know, so, and and when I talk about it, a lot of people are like, man, get out of here. A lot of my brothers are like, yo, man, I can get any woman I want. And I'm stuck in this corner because no one really can identify what I'm going through. But that's kind of the situation.
I can understand. Yes.
So Cheryl, when it comes to this subject, you're saying the climate is changing.
It is, yes, and it's gotten better for interracial couples of either pattern. And again, I'm happy to see that happening because I look at the Baha'is, the Baha'i religion. I think about those people. I don't live that far from the Baha'i temple, and there's only one Baha'i temple per continent, and the one in the United States isn't far from me. And the Baha'is believe that interracial marriages is the way to world peace. And I think that's, I thought, that's pretty good. We could use a little peace right through here. Got all kinds of people down here stirring up the pot, as you well know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Did the second book give you any revelations the first one didn't? Or
No.
did it reinforce?
It reinforced pretty much what I thought I had seen. No, I didn't learn anything really new in with doing the second study, but it was quite, as I said, it was quite interesting because, for example, I felt it was great that I was interviewing people that really were comfortable with who they were. I can say categorically that almost all the women I interviewed had really good self-esteem, felt good about themselves, felt good about the men they dated. Even when these relationships didn't work out, they were able to recover and move forward. And they didn't take that a relationship's failure as being any shortcoming in terms of race. They may have had personality conflicts going on, but they never identified them as racial conflicts. And that was really one of the best outcomes I found in both of my studies, that these relationships really were based on initial attraction, honest, authentic attraction, and they proceeded from there, however they played out.
Wow. That's fantastic. Outside of Black men, have you had any critics of the book outside of Black men?
No, I can't say that I really have, and I don't want to put too fine a point on Black men criticizing me either. There's always people, they haven't read the book. The title is provocative on purpose because I put it in your face. This is what this book is about, unapologetically. But oftentimes, as I said, the few Black men that have been upset, that I know just based on their comments, they haven't read the book. I've been in many conversations with Black male students. They got it. They read the book. It wasn't so okay. It wasn't I'm trying to trash one group or so on. So, again, I can say that not really. I've had a couple of people say, well, what's going to happen to the Black family if Black women start marrying out? I said, well, we didn't ask Black men what was going to happen to the Black family when they married out. Why can't we just have Black families? I mean, anyone in this country, the probability of finding a quote unquote Black person that is not mixed racially somewhere in the ancestry is not good. I mean, it's very high. Most people are. So this is what Black families look like, is what I'm trying to say. Just as there's no monolithic white family, there's no monolithic Black family. So I see the fact that people having good, healthy human relationships as being the overriding factor.
So as we wind down the conversation here, and time is,
I didn't realize which time it's passed. It's been great.
Well, this is why we do conversations here. Before we let you go, because I know you have to take care of your wonderful dog, just some calls to actions for, I would say, when it comes to this subject, some call to actions for, first of all, Black men.
What should they do? Well, just read the book. That's all. I mean, just recognize and be open. Don't feel that because a Black, you see a Black woman with a white man or a man of another ethnic group, that you're in any way being put down. That would be one of the first things. And just you be honest in your relationships. But as I said, my message is really to everybody. I think we all need to be honest in our relationships. As one of my sons says, Mom, people love who they love. And I think that's fine. And just recognize we're all human beings. We're all made by the same creator. And, I really hope that if we get to the other side here, that I'm not going to deal with these kind of issues. But in this lifetime, the most important thing, I think, is that people get an opportunity to live out the full expression of their humanity with whomever they really wish.
Well put. With this subject, do you feel that it's in any way, again, we had talked about it earlier, that people think it's threatening the blackness?
You'll get some people that will think that it's threatening blackness, but by the other token, you get some people that feel it's expanding the concept of blackness. In the same way that white people don't represent any one racial ethnic group, neither do black people, and that's good all the way around. What I mean is that among white populations, how many times, well, I'm Irish and I'm this and I'm Irish and I'm Polish and this. Well, black people the same way.
There you go. Well, I would like to say thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule.
Thank you.
If people want to get a hold of the book or want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Well, my book is being sold on Amazon. Here I'm talking with you. Wouldn't you think I'd have a copy of the book to show? But I know that you probably have it on your website.
Yes, I do.
The title of the book, if you just let people know what it is. If they Google my name, I'm going to come up. And I have a website, CherylJudice.org, that they can check out. That's one way. And there's a contact me button on that website if they want to get my email and contact me with any questions. If they want to read my book, it's on Amazon. And again, the paperback version is $20. The ebook version is $9.99. I tried to make it as accessible to people as I possibly could. And again, I hope that people will get something out of it. I've been gratified so far with the responses I've been getting from my book and people's responses to what I've written. So that's the best thing that happens, that people learn something.
Is there another book down the road?
Well, we'll see. Like I said, I might study this issue from the LGBTQ population. That might be in the offing. We'll see, again, if I can pull all that together within the next couple of years or more.
Before we let you go, what has been one comment about this book that's really resonated you?
The best comment has come from a couple of women that have emailed me to tell me that they read my book and they changed their thinking and they went online. And one woman said, I went online. Okay, I'm going to give this a shot. I changed my profile. This was a Black woman who had limited her search to Black men unsuccessfully. She changed her profile and she said she'd be open to dating any men. And she listed as long as they met these characteristics. Within 2 weeks, she heard from, I believe it was 3 or 4 men. 2 were white, 1 was Hispanic, and 1 may have been from another racial ethnic group. But at any rate, she emailed me to let me know that at that point, she had been dating one of the white men for 7 weeks. And it had been, I never would have thought about doing this, as she pointed. And another woman emailed me and said, I really loved this book. Thanks so much for taking the time to do the research. Guess what? I'm dating a white man now. I had a colleague that I used to have long conversations with, a real pretty woman. Once again, she was holding out forever for this Black Prince Charming that never came around. Well, I lost contact with her because she changed jobs. She found out I had written the book. And so she gave me a quick call. Okay, you won. And then, so right now she's dating outside
you
the ring.
won.
So, because I kept saying, why are you going to spend your whole life single without seeing who else is out here? Then maybe for you. And so it's been good that way. And so, again, that was the whole purpose of doing it. When you're in sociology, the idea is to try and affect social change. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people be happier.
So as we just continue on for a little bit here, is what you wanted to have you achieved what you wanted to with this book?
I have achieved what I want to with the book and what I've done, but there's still a long way for me to go to get that message out.
Fair enough. It is Dr. Vibe here. I'm host producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of epic conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. Want to say thank you to everyone who came in tonight. Ryan, who came into that conversation. We had Alex in from the Get Vocal team. Luke. We also had Cliff. We also had E.T., Anthony. We had, let me just scroll down and see if anyone else. Lokesh from the Get Vocal team. Thank you very much. Also on YouTube, we had Serena Wills. Thank you so much for stopping in. Always a great supporter. And also DS, thank you for your question. Much appreciated. Not taken for granted. On the Periscope end, we had Sean Osby. We had Shadow 3413, which is Bobby. Thank you so much. We also had Olga Band Prince Will, who's out of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Also, Reginald A. Howard, who hosts a Black mental health podcast, and New Foresight. And I'm sure there's some others. If I forgot to mention you, it's my head, not my heart. Like to say, as always, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, a solution for someone's problem. I always say on my sign off, first of all, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions. And finally, I always leave this one to the last. Aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Thank you so much for watching. Have an outstanding evening. Day weekend this weekend in the States, or is it next weekend?
No, couple weekends.
Couple weekends. So I got it. I don't live there, so I just guessed. We get the holiday first. All right. And let me say that, Cheryl, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I've enjoyed myself as well.
Thank you. God bless. Peace, well. Keep the faith. Good night, everybody.
Good night.